Hey everybody, and welcome to DC Fine Art. Today I'll be working with these glass marbles and doing the glass texture and the reflection in color pencil. So I have this part here sped up just a little bit. It's me just erasing some of those darker graphite lines. I didn't want them to show through too much or anything whenever I go over it with the color pencil. And when you're creating anything with glass, just make sure you look at your reference photo. So just I know you see a marble, but when you look at your reference photo, look at the colors that's in that picture. So that's what I'm doing right here. Right now I'm kind of looking at the edge of the marble. I'm seeing that it's like got these different tones around the marble. Like you'll have a lighter tone, or it'll go from light, and then as you're going around have little darker areas. So I'll be making sure I have a sharp point on my pencil, and I'll be changing the colors like from dark to light on the blues. And then also I decided instead of just listing just the brand of color pencils that I used, I'm going to go ahead and list below the colors and the brand that I use in this picture. So in this piece, I'll go ahead and list those below in the description, so that way you kind of see what kind of colors I used in creating this piece. But it's not identical, the colors that I chose, I just kind of looked at my reference photo, seen that there was a blue that looked similar to it, and I went ahead and made out a scratch piece of paper where I just kind of did a sample swatch of the pencils, so that way I can kind of see if they're similar to the colors that the reference photo had. And that's all I really did. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have the exact same colors in order to make it look realistic. The only thing I do is make sure that I look at the reference photo and I try and put those colors in the areas that I can see it on that reference photo. And so here I made sure at the very start of it, when I'm working on the marbles, I'll go through and start out with the brightest colors in it. Like it'll have reflections of white little reflections in it. So I'll take my Derwent drawing Chinese white pencil and I'll go through and start marking with it on all my whites first. So that way I know those are where it goes. I don't want to cover it up and then make it too dark and then you can't brighten it back up. So that's what I did first at the very beginning, was going over the whitest parts first, and then I started going around the marble and just kind of outlining it. Now with this area with the green part of the marble, I'll come in with a lighter color, and then I'll start adding in some darker colors for the shading. Just like the reference photo shows, it'll have a lighter turquoise, then it'll have this little bit of a darker green kind of going up through it, and I'll just take a little bit darker of that color and then start laying it down, the transition between light green and dark green, and everything's just based off the reference photo. And if you're needing to tone it down, in some areas when I was working on these marbles, it looks like the glass kind of gives it that blue tint over the top of that color, and you just do that. Just do what the reference photo shows. If it looks like a blue tint over the top of this yellowish greenish lime green kind of look to it, if I needed to and it showed that in the reference photo, then I just take my lighter blue and just kind of go over it, the area that has that blue look to it. And that's all I do to create that look of it being inside of the glass. So here I just take, and I'm just using two colors on this one. And like I said below, I'll have them listed right now. I don't know the names of those colors, but it was a lighter, I want to say more of a russet kind of color. And if it needed to be lighter to where it faded out right here, I just added the white to it. So the white was on the bottom, and then I would lightly kind of go over that white, and that'll end up blending out whenever I use the OMS, or the odorless mineral spirits. So that way it's got that tone of it fading out within the marble. So the one thing about working with glass too, I know I've done this with like some other pieces that I had. I created like a wine glass with some wine being poured in it, and I wanted to see, you know, how it was the first time I ever did do glass before. And so I tried it out, and I noticed that as long as you're teaching your mind and teaching your eyes to focus on the colors and not that it's just, you know, wine being poured into the glass, just, you got to get that out of your head and just start really focusing on the colors itself. I mean, the colors come in different shapes, different sizes, you know, within that painting. And as long as you can keep your eye on where those little marks go, or those different colors transition out, then it's a way of, you're having to train yourself. You're having to train your mind. You're training your eyes to look at these details. It doesn't even have to be perfect. So mine could be shaped a little bit different, but you know, it's hard to tell unless you're putting the reference photo directly up to it and then thinking, oh, okay, I see a difference here, you know. But whenever you're looking at it just alone, I mean, it looks correct. So it's really hard to notice those little things. Now on these marbles, I could have put multiple layers on it, but I only did like 2 layers. And my 2 layers, like I've said before, I calculate them out by adding enough pigment, and it's plenty of going over it and over it, adding enough pigment on the paper before I start blending with the OMS. And whenever I do add that pigment, blend out with the OMS, I call that 1. And then I go over it again with color pencil and put enough pigment on the paper, and then when I blend out again with the OMS, I call that 2. So with these marbles, I just stuck with 2 layers on it. Now here's where I'm putting in the white for the for the highlights, and I'll just go back over it. It's so much easier once you blend out with OMS to be able to use your white to kind of brighten up a highlight that you have on there, so that way it really pops. Because what helps out with dimension and making it stand out and look more realistic is having those darks dark and your lights light. So my darks, I wanted to make sure that they were dark enough, but my lights needed to be a little bit lighter. So after I blended out with my OMS, I came back through with my white, Chinese white, the Derwent drawing, and I went back over it, and it really popped out. So it actually has that 3D look effect, you know, like it's actually, you know, realistic, or at least that realistic part. Boy, I'm getting tongue-tied. So there I am, kind of going over it with the OMS again. And the only reason why I was doing that is to smooth out some areas that maybe looked a little bit rough, or had more of that little grainy kind of look to it. And so just taking a little bit of that OMS and making sure it's definitely dried out, as, you know, on a paper towel as good as possible. Then I would just barely wipe over it just a few little times just to kind of smooth it out. So here I go again. I'm with the Derwent Drawing Chinese White, and I was going over the brightest whites of the marble on this piece. And then after I do that, then I jump over to the darkest areas on the marble. So I go from white, or the lightest areas, and then I go to the dark. Then I guess I do everything in between on the marble. So, but I want to get my darks and my lightest lights in there for sure. And see all these lines that I have drawn with the pencil, those are just like where my brightest highlights would be at. I kind of got those kind of drawn in there. They're not perfect, they're not the shape that I want them to be, but I know where they are, you know, kind of where they go on my painting. And then the other ones, there's some of the other little lines that I draw is just kind of shows where either my darkest areas are, or sometimes like if a line goes through and makes like a swirl or something, you know, I kind of add that little line. But I don't draw when I'm doing when I'm looking at the reference photo and drawing it, I don't do every single color change, you know, because then it would get really crazy, really messy, too much graphite on the paper, too much to erase. And then once you go back and look at it, you'll get really confused on what line's what. I mean, you can't really put in every single line when you're doing your drawing, but just a couple little lines, just so that way you know where your lights go, where your darks go, and maybe some important, you know, start and stop points of maybe like, for instance, that green up there on the top where it swirls and does that little swirl, maybe a little line like that. But everything else, you want to train yourself into looking at the colors and the color changes within the glass or the marble. Now you see me use some of that little russet color look in there, because in the reference photo it had like that orangey color, but then it had that blue glass that kind of shaded it out, more of a bluish tone to it. And so that's exactly what I did, even for the tip of that little russet color that's right in that area, like that orangey color. I added a little bit of blue over the top of it, so that way it looks like it's kind of behind glass, like deeper within the blue glass. So I did exactly what I seen. And it always looks a mess. Like once you get done and you add all these different colors to it by looking at your reference photo, seeing all these little changes in colors, once you get done with this first layer, you'll look at it and be like, wow, it's like camouflage, you know, it's very it's not all together. It's in pieces is what it looks like, just pieces and patches of different colors. And once you go and start blending it out with OMS, once you get enough pigment on the paper, it really does smooth together and it makes a whole lot more sense. Now, right in that little area, I decided that by looking at the reference photo and how much white I had down for that reflective part, you know, it's easy just to go back and kind of fill it in and make it a little smaller or do any kind of adjustment. You can still do that. Now I'm over here blending it out. It gets so much smoother once you blend it out too. It like really, really forms and comes together. I'm starting to let that, while I let that dry, I usually try and go and hop over to something else and work on something else while that dries. So I'm deciding to do the shadowing part of it, of the marble. And how you do that is basically the same thing. You want to look at your reference photo and you want to make that contrast, that difference between one marble and the shadow. So that way you can kind of see the difference between it's a shadow and it's a marble. And the way I do that is the marble, depending on the reference photo, the marble the outline part of it may be a little darker than the shadow, or the marble may be a little bit lighter than what the shadow is. So the little line that goes right by the shadow, make sure that it's, most likely it's going to be lighter, but you just never know. I mean, it all just depends on how the light hits it. But that's how you make the difference between it. It's either a little bit lighter or a little bit darker around the outline next to the shadow. Now this is my layer number 2, just kind of going in, darkening some areas up that needed to be darkened, and then also brightening up some areas. So just going back over it, adding some final touches to it. And the one thing you want to remember also is that color pencil is a slow medium. So it does take time in order to do color pencil. Just by doing one marble, and I time myself on it just for, I guess, giggles on it. But I time myself, and to do one marble with the shadow and do the second layer, it literally took me 2 hours per marble. So that's what I kind of rounded it up to, is 2 hours per marble. So it does take a little bit of time, and that's just doing the marble. I mean, just think if you were doing like a whole entire picture. I mean, it definitely would take a lot of time, and that's fine. I mean, that's just how color pencil is. I mean, it's very time consuming, but it's also so much fun. I mean, it really is. I've been enjoying doing these color pencil pieces. Now here I'm creating the next shadow, and everything is just based off of the colors that I see in the reference photo. Actually, let me go ahead and put the reference photo up there. There we go. Now I got the reference photo up there. I'll just leave it up there for a little bit. I know it can get a little bit distracting. I'm not for sure with that big old reference photo. But you can see the 3 marbles. I've got those up there. Those are the ones I'm creating right now, and just kind of going over. You can see that it's not identical to the marble pieces that's on there, but it definitely is, my version of it. And you can see where the lights and the darks are. You can see where the shadows are. And you can also see where you kind of look around the outline of the marble and see how the color changes. And after I got through doing like the first layer of the shadow, then I came back through with my OMS and smoothed it out, and then I'll actually go back over it again with the white, Derwent white, to kind of lighten it a little bit so it's more translucent looking, not so rough. I mean, it's really rough whenever you do your first layer. Okay, now I'm starting on the 3rd marble, and on this one here it's going to go the exact same way as the other 2. I'm starting out with my lightest colors first, doing a lot of the reflective, the really bright whites that are in the reference photo. And then after that I'll go around the marble doing the transition between lights and darks, and then adding in some of my darkest areas. I go to that next. So the same kind of process as the other two. Do my whites first, do my darks next, outline the marble, and then start eyeballing all the color changes and the different colors within the glass. Which to me now, it's like whenever I look at it, I just see these changes of different colors from dark to light, little patches of different colors, and that's all I'm going off of. There's also another good thing about doing marbles or doing a repeat of the same thing. Like there was 6 of these marbles, and if you do something like this, and it's really good practice to where if you do one and you do another one, the next thing you know, you're getting repetitive practice doing the repeat of the same kind of thing over and over and over again. It may be different texture look to it, it may be a different type of marble, but the thing is you're working the same thing over and over again. You're looking at those colors, you're starting to train yourself to look at these colors. Also, I guess I should have went ahead and told you guys that this reference photo that I got was also from Pixabay, so I'm pretty sure if you guys just type in, marbles, you'll be able to find it on Pixabay. And it was a really good one to, at least I thought, to choose to do something that had a repetitive over and over and over again kind of thing. So you got the glass, but it's not just doing one solid glass piece, it's like doing several. So you're starting to train yourself with each one of these, which I think it makes a very good practice piece. And also the paper that I was using is another one of the Canson Mi Teintes, and it's the pastel paper. I just flipped it over and used the smooth side of it because I didn't want the rough side. The rough side's more of like if you're using pastel or a charcoal that needs a little bit more texture and tooth to it. So I just flipped it over and used the smooth side for the color pencil. And also all the supplies that I'm using, I'm going to be having those listed in the description box below. So that way, if I missed anything, or knowing me, sometimes I could jump into details on how to do things or how I'm doing things that I kind of skip over some of the things that I've used in this piece. So make sure you check out my description box below where I'll be going over the different materials or supplies used in order to create this piece. And also, if you want to see more of these videos and you like what you see, go ahead and click the like and subscribe button and click the little bell icon so that way YouTube can notify you whenever I come out with a new video. Because since I am not on a strict schedule, they could come out any day of the week, and I would definitely like to see you there and not to miss one. And if you want to leave a comment below, maybe on something that you'd like to see me work on, whether it's a pastel piece or a charcoal piece, or maybe you're needing help with something, leave me a comment below. I'd love to try and help you. And here is the 3 finished marbles, and here is the finished piece. I hope you all enjoyed this, and I'd love to see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.